Judge William Thompson slammed his gavel down hard. The sound echoed through the quiet courtroom. 10 years, he said coldly, not even looking at Emma Clark as he spoke. No one made a sound. Everyone could feel it, the sentence was too harsh. Emma stood straight, her hands shaking slightly. She was a small woman with kind eyes, working as a cleaner at Millfield Hospital for the past 15 years. She had never been in trouble before. "I didn't do it," she whispered, but the judge ignored her. As the guards led her away, Emma turned back. Her eyes met the judge's for just a moment. "I forgive you," she said quietly. Judge Thompson looked away quickly, pretending he hadn't heard. Millfield was a town where everyone knew everyone else. The courthouse stood in the center, an old stone building with tall windows. Inside those walls, Judge Thompson had ruled for 20 years. People called him fair but firm to his face. Behind his back, they called him the Hammer. The case seemed simple. Money had gone missing from the hospital office. Emma had been cleaning there that night. No one else had access, according to the hospital director. The evidence was all circumstantial, but Judge Thompson didn't care. He had seen her type before, he thought. After court, he drove home in the rain. His big house on Hill Street felt empty, as it had since his wife died 3 years ago. Only his old dog Rusty greeted him, tail wagging despite his arthritis. The judge poured himself a drink and sat by the window. Emma's face kept appearing in his mind. There had been no fear in her eyes, only sadness and that strange forgiveness. It bothered him. His phone rang. It was Robert, his court clerk. "Sir, about the Clark case." "It's finished," the judge cut him off. "But sir, new evidence just came in. Security camera footage from the parking lot shows someone else entering through the back door during the time in question." The judge frowned. "Too late. I've made my ruling." "But sir." "That's all, Robert." He hung up. That night, sleep wouldn't come. Rain beat against his windows as the judge tossed and turned. Emma Clark's quiet words echoed in his mind, "I forgive you." The next morning, he went to his mother's house. At 85, Mary Thompson still lived independently in the small cottage where the judge had grown up. She had the television on, tuned to local news. "William," she said when he entered, "did you sentence that poor Clark woman yesterday?" He nodded stiffly, taking a seat across from her. 10 years? For money that might not even have been stolen by her? His mother shook her head. "That's not justice, William. The evidence was thin, according to what I've heard." His mother's eyes were sharp. "You're too quick to judge people from that side of town." "That's not true," he protested, but even to his own ears, the words sounded hollow. His mother sighed and pointed to the old photo albums on her shelf. "Bring me the blue one," she said. The judge did as she asked. His mother had been organizing old photographs recently, putting them in order, writing names and dates on the backs. "I have something to show you," she said, taking the album. "Something about the Clark family you should know." As rain continued to fall outside, the judge sat next to his mother while she slowly turned the pages of the album. His mind was still on Emma's case, on Robert's call about new evidence, on the nagging feeling that he had made a terrible mistake. His mother stopped at a page with a faded photograph. It showed a much younger version of herself standing beside another young woman. They were both smiling outside the old Millfield Hospital building. "Do you know who this is?" his mother asked, pointing to the other woman. The judge shook his head. But something about the woman's eyes seemed familiar. "This is Mary Clark," his mother said quietly. "Emma's grandmother." The judge looked closer at the photograph. The resemblance to Emma was striking. "There's something about Mary Clark you need to know," his mother continued, her voice growing serious. "Something that happened many years ago, before you were born. Something that changes everything." The judge felt a chill run through him as his mother began to tell the story, a story that would soon turn his world, and his certainty, completely upside down. The END Judge Thompson listened closely as his mother spoke about the photograph. Her hands, spotted with age, trembled slightly as she pointed to the young woman standing beside her younger self. "Mary Clark saved my life," she said simply. "And in doing so, she saved yours too." His mother explained that in 1957, a fire broke out in the East Wing of Millfield Hospital. She had been there, 7 months pregnant with William's father, getting a routine checkup. "The smoke came so fast," she recalled, her eyes distant with memory. "People were running, pushing past each other to get out. I fell. No one stopped to help me." No one except Mary Clark, who had been working as a cleaner at the hospital, just like her granddaughter Emma did now. She could have run like everyone else. Instead, she came back for me. She helped me up, put her own scarf over my face to keep out the smoke, and guided me through the corridors. We were the last ones out before that section of the building collapsed." The judge stared at the photograph. Mary Clark had a kind smile, the same gentle eyes as Emma. "If not for her, both your father and you would never have existed," his mother finished. She turned the photograph over. On the back, in faded blue ink, were the words, "With my savior, Mary, 1957. "There's more," his mother said. She carefully removed a yellowed envelope that had been tucked behind the photograph. "Mary wrote to me every Christmas until she passed away 15 years ago. I kept all her letters." The judge opened the envelope with careful fingers. The letter inside was written in neat, flowing handwriting. "Dear Martha, another year has passed. I hope this Christmas finds you and your family well. James must be starting university now. How proud you must be. My own daughter Jane has just had a baby girl, Emma. She's the sweetest little thing. I hope one day our families might know each other properly, though I understand why that hasn't happened. People in this town have long memories about which families belong where. Perhaps one day that will change. Wishing you joy, Mary." Judge Thompson felt something cold settle in his stomach. He had just sentenced the granddaughter of the woman who had saved his family line to 10 years in prison. And based on what? Circumstantial evidence and his own biases about her type. "Why didn't you ever tell me this story?" he asked his mother. She looked down. "Your father didn't approve of me keeping in touch with Mary. He said we came from different worlds. I'm ashamed to say I listened to him." As the years passed, it became harder to explain why I'd kept silent. Judge Thompson stood abruptly. "I need to go." "What will you do?" his mother asked. "What I should have done yesterday. Look at all the evidence properly." He drove straight to his chambers at the courthouse, despite it being Saturday. The building was quiet, most offices empty. But he knew Robert would be there. Robert was always working weekends. "I need everything on the Clark case," the judge told him. "And I mean everything, especially that security footage you mentioned." Robert looked surprised but nodded. "I'll bring it right in." For the next 3 hours, Judge Thompson reviewed every document, statement, and piece of evidence. The security footage clearly showed someone entering the hospital through the back door during Emma's shift, someone whose build and height matched the hospital administrator, not Emma. He found statements from Emma's co-workers, all attesting to her honesty. He found financial records showing that money had been disappearing from the hospital in small amounts for months, not just the one night Emma was accused of stealing. Most damning of all, he found a preliminary police report suggesting the hospital administrator, Peter Wilson, had gambling debts. This report had somehow never made it into the court documents. Judge Thompson sat back in his chair, a sick feeling growing inside him. He had made a terrible mistake, one that could have ruined an innocent woman's life. And not just any woman, the granddaughter of the person who had saved his mother, and by extension, him. He picked up his phone and called the district attorney. "Frank, it's William Thompson. We need to talk about the Clark case. I'm filing for an immediate review." He paused, listening to the protest on the other end. "No, this can't wait until Monday. I've seen evidence that was never presented in court. I believe a miscarriage of justice has occurred." After hanging up, the judge sat alone in his chambers as evening shadows lengthened across the room. He took out the photograph of his mother and Mary Clark again, studying the faces of the two young women smiling in a world that had tried to keep them apart. The judge nodded, suddenly understanding what he needed to do. "Mrs. Clark, I'm going to need your help. Together, we're going to get your daughter out of prison. And then we're going to look at every case like hers. This isn't just about Emma anymore." For the first time, Jane Clark's expression softened slightly. "My mother would have liked that," she said. Over the next few weeks, Judge Thompson worked tirelessly to right his wrong. He faced resistance from every direction. His fellow judges questioned his judgment. The district attorney worried about setting a precedent. Even some of his friends stopped calling. "You're throwing away your career for a cleaner?" His colleague Judge Harris asked during lunch one day. "I'm doing my job," Judge Thompson replied simply. Justice doesn't care about careers. The investigation into Peter Wilson moved quickly once properly started. Bank records showed suspicious deposits matching the amounts missing from the hospital. When questioned, Wilson broke down and confessed to stealing the money to pay gambling debts. He had deliberately planted evidence to frame Emma, knowing she had cleaned the office that night. But even with Wilson's confession, legal hurdles remained. The system moved slowly, designed to resist quick changes. Judge Thompson grew frustrated but refused to give up. He visited Emma in prison. The meeting room was cold and bare, with a table bolted to the floor and plastic chairs. When Emma entered, escorted by a guard, she showed no surprise at seeing him. "Mrs. Clark," he began formally, "I've come to tell you that we're working to overturn your conviction." Emma studied him with those quiet eyes so like her grandmother's. "Why now?" she asked. He placed the photograph of their grandmothers on the table between them. "Because I learned the truth. About you, about your grandmother, about my own blindness." Emma picked up the photograph, her handcuffed wrists making the movement awkward. "Grandma Mary," she said softly. She had this picture on her wall. She looked up at him. "You're Martha's grandson?" He nodded. "Grandma used to tell me about Martha's son becoming an important judge. She was proud of that connection, even though your family never acknowledged ours." The judge felt shame wash over him. "I'm sorry," he said, meaning it for so many things. Emma set the photograph down. "What happens now?" "Peter Wilson has confessed. Your case is under review. It might take some time, but you will be released." "And then what?" Emma asked. "I've lost my job. My home was rented to someone else. My reputation in this town is ruined." The judge hadn't thought that far ahead. In his mind, securing her release would fix everything. But of course, it wouldn't. The damage was already done. "I can't undo what's happened," he admitted. "But I can help you rebuild." Emma smiled for the first time, a small sad smile. "Like our grandmothers, you mean? Trying to bridge the gap between their worlds?" "Yes," he said. "Exactly like that." As he left the prison that day, Judge Thompson felt both heavy with guilt and strangely hopeful. He drove to his mother's house, finding her in the garden despite the cool weather. "How is she?" his mother asked without preamble. "Strong. Resilient." He sat beside her on the garden bench. "Like her grandmother, I imagine." His mother nodded. "Mary was the strongest person I ever knew. Not physically, but here. She touched her heart. She taught me to see beyond Hill Street." "I wish I had learned that lesson earlier," the judge said. That evening, he received a call from Robert. "Sir, there's been a development in the Clark case. The review board is meeting tomorrow morning. They're fast-tracking it based on Wilson's confession." "I'll be there," the judge promised. He barely slept that night, too anxious about the board's decision. Outside his window, the town of Millfield slept under a blanket of stars, unaware that its understanding of justice was about to be challenged. The next morning dawned clear and cold. Judge Thompson arrived at the courthouse early, dressed in his best suit. The review board, 5 judges from neighboring counties, sat stern-faced at the long table. Judge William Thompson, began the head of the board, Judge Eleanor Reynolds, you've petitioned for the immediate release of Emma Clark based on new evidence and a confession from the true perpetrator.
Is that correct? Yes, Your Honor. And you're willing to formally acknowledge that your original ruling was in error?
He stood straight, aware that every person in that room was watching him.
Not just in error, Your Honor. It was biased and unjust.
I failed in my duty as a judge and as a human being.
A murmur ran through the room.
Judges rarely admitted to mistakes so plainly. Judge Reynolds studied him for a long moment. The board has reviewed the evidence.
We find sufficient cause to overturn Emma Clark's conviction immediately. Relief flooded through him.
But Judge Reynolds wasn't finished. However, this raises serious questions about your other rulings, Judge Thompson. The board recommends a comprehensive review of all your cases from the past 5 years.
He nodded.
I've already begun that process myself, Your Honor. As the meeting ended, Judge Thompson stood alone in the hallway, feeling both vindicated and humbled. The hard work was just beginning. But for the first time in weeks, he felt like he could breathe again.
The end 3 days later, Emma Clark walked out of prison into the bright spring sunshine. Judge Thompson waited by his car in the parking lot. He had offered to drive her home, unsure if she would accept. Emma paused when she saw him, then walked over slowly. She carried a small bag with her few belongings. Your mother is waiting for you, he said. She's made your favorite meal. Emma nodded. Thank you for the ride.
The drive to Riverside was quiet at first. Millfield looked different somehow, as if the town itself had changed while Emma was away. But it was Judge Thompson who had changed, seeing with new eyes the divide between Hill Street and Riverside. What will you do now? He finally asked as they neared her mother's house.
Emma looked out the window.
Start over, I suppose.
Though it won't be easy. People have long memories in this town.
The judge gripped the steering wheel tighter.
I've been thinking about that.
About how to make things right, not just for you, but for others. They pulled up outside Jane's house. The older woman was already on the porch, tears in her eyes at the sight of her daughter. They embraced for a long moment while Judge Thompson waited awkwardly by his car.
Jane finally turned to him. Will you come in for tea, Judge Thompson?
It was a small offering, but he understood its importance.
I'd be honored, Mrs. Clark.
Inside, over tea and homemade cake, Judge Thompson shared his idea.
I'm establishing a legal review program for cases with potential bias.
But I need help from someone who understands both sides of Millfield.
Someone who has experienced injustice firsthand. Emma set down her cup. You want me to help you? After what happened?
Especially after what happened, he said.
Who better to spot the flaws in the system than someone the system failed? I'm not a lawyer, Emma pointed out.
No, but you're smart and fair.
You could be trained as a legal advocate. The program would pay for your education.
Jane watched her daughter carefully.
It's a good opportunity, Emma. Emma was quiet for a moment.
Why are you doing this? She finally asked the judge.
Is it guilt? Or do you really want things to change?
Both, he admitted honestly.
I feel guilty, yes.
But more than that, I want Millfield to be a place where justice is truly blind, not in the sense that it ignores differences, but that it treats everyone fairly despite them.
2 weeks later, the Millfield Justice Review Program opened in a small office halfway between Hill Street and Riverside.
Judge Thompson had used his own money to rent the space and buy the basic equipment.
Emma started work as the program coordinator while beginning online courses in legal studies.
Their first case involved a young man from Riverside who had received a harsh sentence for a minor offense. As they reviewed the file together, Judge Thompson was struck by Emma's insights. You see things I miss, he told her. Different experiences, different perspective, she replied simply. By the end of the first month, they had identified 12 cases for review. By the end of the year, that number had grown to over 50.
5 people had been released from prison. Dozens more had their sentences reduced.
The program gained attention.
Other towns asked how they could start similar initiatives.
Judge Thompson was invited to speak at legal conferences, always with Emma at his side.
Not everyone approved.
Judge Thompson lost friends. Some people in Millfield crossed the street when they saw him coming. He received anonymous letters calling him a traitor to his position. None of that mattered compared to the work they were doing.
On the one-year anniversary of Emma's release, they held a small celebration in the office. Jane Clark brought a cake.
Judge Thompson's mother, now using a walker but still sharp as ever, came too. The two elderly women sat together, looking at old photographs and sharing stories of their long-distance friendship. "Our grandmothers would be proud," Emma said, joining Judge Thompson by the window.
"I hope so," he replied.
Outside, Millfield was changing, slowly but surely.
The invisible line between Hill Street and Riverside was beginning to blur.
A new community center had opened, welcoming people from both sides of town.
The hospital had instituted fair hiring practices under new management. It wasn't perfect. Change never came easy or without resistance. But it was happening.
"You know," Emma said thoughtfully, "when I told you I forgave you that day in court, I didn't really mean it.
I was just trying to keep my dignity."
Judge Thompson nodded.
"I know. I wouldn't have forgiven me either."
"But I do now," she said.
"Not because you fixed everything, you haven't and you can't. But because you're trying to be better. That's all any of us can do."
As the sun set over Millfield, casting long shadows across both Hill Street and Riverside, Judge Thompson realized that some debts could never be fully repaid. But perhaps they could be transformed into something new, a bridge between worlds, a path toward healing, a promise that the mistakes of the past wouldn't define the future.
The end.